We're going to be continuing in the halachas of bar Metzrah. Each seif, almost each seif, has dinim tanegei l'maisa, and which essentially each seif, or each few seifim, there are cases which end up in dentitis, and it's important to know the nekudas which are relevant to it. This is the second shir on bar Metzrah. We're going to move to Sifim Ches Tes Yud, three nekudas, three seifim, and different points in each seif. Sif Ches talks about buying on credit when the moicher, that means the owner of the land, sells it to somebody on credit. He tells him, this is the price of the thing, you could pay me in 3 months and 6 months payment plan. So the halacha is that there is no dinah de bar Metzrah. That's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Unless the matzrin comes and tells the seller, I'm willing to pay the full price right now and you don't have to wait for the buyer to pay you. And the Rama adds something which he says, or if the seller is not makpid, doesn't care if the matzrin will pay him with a delay. And then there is dinah de bar Metzrah. But which implies, if the moicher is unhappy with the matzah and doesn't trust him for this, then there is no dinah de bar Metzrah. Why is there no dinah de bar Metzrah according to the Mechaber in this scenario? The Smer explains quite simply, the moicher knows his clients, he knows his neighbors. He knows that if he knows his neighbor is a dreikup. He's going to make with him payment terms for 90 days. It's going to end up being 3 years. So he's not interested in dealing with him. Or maybe he knows the neighbor is a tough guy. He's going to start playing around with him. Everybody knows. There are cases when you purchase a house, and this comes up a lot, that there's different kinds of buyers. There are the buyers that come, you tell them a price, and they sign the paper and they pay what they're supposed to, and that's it. They get the mortgage or whatever the situation is. And there are those that after they agree with you on a price, they start handling. Well, I found a crack over here. It's a 100-year-old house. Doesn't make a difference. Found a crack. You're missing there's a battery missing in the smoke alarm. I see that the window over here, there's a leak over here, there's a crack over there, the steps are not straight, and start knocking down the price. And now the guy is stuck because he has to make a cheshbon. To cancel the sale is a headache. To sue the guy for specific performance and to force him to pay it is also cost him money. So he makes a cheshbon, he's going to end up spending $20,000. So you might as well give the guy a discount $20,000. It's a known trick. You could do it. Now it's on video, so the whole world is going to know that you could do these tricks. But it happens. So a person knows who his neighbor is. He lived with him. He lived next door to him. So he's not interested in dealing with him. I'm not interested in dealing with such a guy. So therefore, that's why the Smer explains. That's why the Rama afterwards tells you, but only if the moicher doesn't care, is not makpid on the matzrin, that he would have given him the same terms, only then do we still say that there is dinah de bar Metzrah. And then Biur Agra right away points out to you an additional point, so something which is obvious, but it's not written, that obviously if the moicher is makpid on the matzrin, then obviously, there's no dinah de bar Metzrah because we know, and we're going to see it later also, that whenever, and we saw it before but not clearly, that whenever there's a hefsed to the moicher, then we don't say dinah de bar Metzrah. If the matzrin taking the place of the keach is going to cause a hefsed to the moicher, then we don't say that there's going to be then we don't say dinah de bar Metzrah. And the fact that he has to deal with this person, he's going to have to chase him, whatever it is considered a hefsed. And that's why we don't see the difference in such a case. The Pischei Tshuva over here brings a tshuva from the Chavas Yair, that let's say comes the matzrin and says, I'm willing to give you a very good mashkan. And that way, you don't have to worry about me paying on time or not paying on time. I'm going to keep the same terms that you give the lekeach. The lekeach, you're not asking for a mashkin. I'm coming and giving you a good mashkin. And give me the same thing. And the seller says, no thank you. I prefer the koine who has no mashkin over you with a mashkin. You still listen to the... We listen to the seller, and we say, it is what it is. We don't do dinner de bar mitzvah. Not only that, the matzrin cannot force a shvuah on the moicher, or a cherem, or anything of the sort, to force him to take an oath that indeed he prefers the seller, he prefers the buyer over the matzrin. Make an announcement in shul, whatever it is. Machrimin, huh?
What type of shvuah? He's swearing that he prefers?
That he doesn't want, that he prefers that way, yeah? If he says, I want to make a shul, he just proved the point of the seller. That's why he doesn't want to deal with such a people. Now the Mishpat Shalom, the Marasham, like I told you, Marasham starts Mishpat Shalom over here in this Siman, in Hilchas Matzronos. It goes through 50, 60 Siman of Choshen Mishpat. He brings his Chavas Yair. And he says, however, you have a Bach. We have the Bach that we have, the Bach that we already know, that if the Matzrin is known to be a rich person, a nice person, and he's known in the public as an easy businessman, and one who could keep to his words, then he has dinner de bar mitzvah, and if the matzah is like that, and he gets the same terms as the lekeach, even, and the moicher can't come and say, no, I don't trust this guy the same way. That's what the Bach says, the Ma'ibri, that's what he quotes the Bach, and obviously Mishpat Shalom right away says, but Maram Ziskin says, that's not much like that from the Ramah. Can't argue with the Ramah. The Ramah clearly says that it's totally in the kpeide of the moicher. If the moicher is makpid, then we're not going to start going into discussions. Do we think that this guy is a gvir? Do we know, does he have a good record on the street or he doesn't have a good record on the street? Because that's not what the halacha is. Okay, back. Now, he brings the Mishpat Shalom continues and brings the Rashba. What does he say over there? He says from the Rashba, it seems even more extreme than the Ramah. That even if the moicher later changes his mind and gets in line and gets along with the matzrin, the dinner de bar mitzvah already got waived. It's done. Once it's off, it's off. So even if later the matzrin and the moicher made peace, and now the moicher says, okay, I'm ready to accept the same terms as you, being that milchatchila he wasn't ready to accept those terms, and the sale was already in place with the lekeach. The lekeach is the one who remains with the land, and the matzrin cannot come and remove him to there. And therefore, the Mishpat Shalom says, if you want to fit the Rashba with the Ramah, you must say that when the Ramah says that the moicher is not makpid, the point of it is not that the moicher is not makpid now. is that the moicher milchatchila says, was megalet, there was a gili das from the moicher, I don't care who's buying it from me. I'm fine giving terms to my neighbor, I'm fine giving terms to the other person. Elamai, the first person who walked through his door was the buyer when he put it up for sale. So therefore, in such a case is when we say that din of the bar metzra doesn't fall off. And he says that that's what the Shem Aryeh paskins like the Rashba. He also points out that that's one way of understanding the Ramah. You could make it that the Ramah and the Rashba disagree, that the Ramah's view is even if he changes his mind afterwards. Now, by the way, all of these machlokes become a great nafkamina down the line, because let's say you take this one for example. What happens if the moicher did change his mind afterwards, and he decided he gets along with the matzrin, and now the matzrin takes the keach to the bezdin. So the matzrin says, I want to follow the Ramah, the simple understanding of the Ramah, moicher nisratze, and therefore I want din of the bar metzra. The keach says, kimli like the Rashba. Now we have a suffix. If you don't want to take the mishpat shalom that merges the two together, even though the mishpat shalom is considered a kimat poisek achron when it comes to these dinim of bar metzra, especially, that you want to take the mishpat shalom as a machriya, then he's going to say kimli like the Rashba, that it's not so. And if you have a suffix, who are you going to be moitzi? Who is the muchzak? On these dinim, you're going to see in a few places, the lekeach remains the muchzak. And therefore, you're not going to be able to be moitzi. Mashenkin, if you have a clear achra, or if you have a clear achra in the Ramah, then you can't say kimli against the Ramah. However, the Mishpat Shalom says, regardless, even if you want to follow this, whichever way you want to understand the Ramah, then you still have to, it only works if the matzrin brings the cash right away. That means the matzrin can't come and say, the moicher gets along with me, and I want to undo, now that he gets along with me, I want to undo the previous issue that we had and try to get the same terms. Now you have to bring the money right away. And then the Mishpat Shalom continues and brings the Kesef HaKachim. The Kesef HaKachim is in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, enough in the Buchacher. And over there he says, the Kesef HaKachim brings a few points. The Mishpat Shalom focuses on some of them. I'm going to go a little bit more into what the Kesef HaKachim brings, so some things are relevant. Also, over there he says, the Kesef HaKachim brings a few points. First of all, if the moicher says that both of them are the same, whether the buyer or the matzah are both equal in his mind, then din of the bar metzra obviously remains, and that is even if the moicher says it after he already sold it, even if the moicher sold it after the matzrin was teveah. The only time when we say there's no din of the bar metzra is if he says that the moicher was that the matzrin was hard, is a ish kosher to him. So now, if now he changes his mind, which is what we discussed before, that the moicher first didn't want to deal with the matzrin, and then afterwards he changed his mind and he decided that the matzrin is the same, he's fine dealing with him also. So then the Kesef HaKachim says there's no more chayzer v'neir, like the Rashba. There's no chayzer v'neir of din matzron. Din matzron has got waived, and that is the end of this din of bar metzra. However, if the matzron comes and says, I'm ready to give a mashkoin or an arev, and therefore and the moicher is ready to accept it now, so then we say that the din of the bar metzra was never cancelled, because could be that, and that is even if he didn't have the arev before, or he had the arev and he didn't know that he could bring an arev. But if the concept is that the moicher would be willing to sell to the matzrin with an arev or with a mashkin, then the fact that he would come later and bring the mashkin and the arev, and the moicher says, I'm fine with it now, that shows that the din of the bar metzra was never mufka from the beginning. Just because of lack of knowledge, or because he didn't know he didn't have an Adav available, whatever it is, that's why he didn't sell to him, it's not mafkei matzanos. The only way to mafkei matzanos is if he says, I'm not interested in dealing with this guy in any way, shape, or form, with a mashkin, without a mashkin, with a Adav, without a Adav, and he doesn't change his mind, and doesn't change his mind later. This whole discussion is only what happens if he changes his mind later. Because ultimately we're still sticking with it. That it depends on hakpadas hamoicher or not. Now, hakpadas hamoicher doesn't apply in a general thing. Just because, and we know this from before, just because the moicher decides he's not interested in dealing with the matzah because he doesn't like him, not because of a financial reason, then there's no hefsed to the moicher, like we explained before. If there's no hefsed to the moicher, then we can't come and cancel bar mitzvah just because he doesn't like him. There has to be a valid reason to get rid of bar mitzvah. The Aruch HaShulchan and Sifkot and Sif Gimel brings a very interesting question. What happens if the moicher is not in Bezdin now? Who is in Bezdin? The Lekeach and the Matzrin. And they start an argument. The Lekeach says, you can't take it from me because I know the moicher told me he'll never sell it to you. I had such a Torah, by the way, where the moicher was not there. We actually put the moicher on the phone later. But the moicher said, the moicher told the Lekeach, I'm selling it to you because I can't trust my neighbor. I would have sold it to my neighbor if it would have come to him, and I trust you. I'm selling it to you because you're a normal person. I know you from business, and my neighbors, I'm a sugar, I don't want to deal with it. And then the Matzon says, no, I'm his neighbor for the last 20 years, and we never had a fight. And we never dealt with it, and I borrowed money from him, I lent him money, we did all things together, and there was no problem. So then he said, nobody could take a shvuah on it, because nobody's going to be able to, nobody could say with Taina's body anything. It's all hearsay. One says, this is my relationship with him, and the other one says, he told me like this. So over there, the Aruch HaShulchan says, ultimately you're stuck in a suffix, and you can't be moitzi from the muchzak. And who's the muchzak? The lekeach. And the matzrin loses out from such a thing. That's Sif Ches. Continue to Sif Tes. Sif Tes is regarding value of property. If you remember in Sif Zayin, we discussed the value of property when a person buys less than what it's worth, and then he wants to charge the matzrin more. Here we're talking about when the lekeach paid more than what it's worth. The lekeach paid 200. That's the example. Paid more than what it's worth. Lekeach paid 200. That's the example Shulchan Aruch brings. And the value of the land is only 100. Shulchan Aruch says the matzrin pays a higher price, regardless of the value. What happens if he comes and he claims it was a knunya? It's a trick. It's not real price over here. I don't even know if the seller Bichlal got 200. He just wrote on the paper 200 to be able to mess me over because he doesn't like me. Then the lekeach has to take a shvuah that he received 200, and then after he takes a shvuah, then he receives 200 from the matzrin, and he has to give him the land. Now, what happens if there's Eidim that he paid 200, and then the lekeach said, the matzrin says, I know bevados that it's only 100, and this is a shtar amana between them, this amana, there's some kind of relationship between them, maybe he's going to get back the 100 or whatever it is, then he first has to pay the 200, get the land, and then afterwards he could go back and ask and be mashbiya if he wants. He could be mashbiya later the lekeach that he paid, that it's taka true that he paid 200. So the difference in the first case and the second case, first case you take a shvuah first, and then the lekeach, the lekeach has to take a shvuah first, and then he receives 200. In the second case, the lekeach gets a 200, and then if it needs be, he could make him take a shvuah. The Smeh over here brings from the Tur that what are we talking about over here? That even though the lekeach, we know the lekeach is a shleach of the matzrin, and therefore the lekeach could have said, the matzrin could have told the lekeach, you're my shleach, I sent you to do something good for me. You messed it up. You should have bought it for me for 100. You ended up buying it to me for 200. So let's be completely b'mevatel the mekach, now able to buy it for 100. He brings from the Torah that it's not so. Why is that? Because sometimes people do pay more for land. if a land, it might be worth that, but for me it's worth more. For whatever reason. Maybe dafka because I'm the matzrin, the lekeach could say, I'm your shliach, I know that there's no land available, it takes years for somebody to buy houses in Crown Heights, and you have a small house, and I know a house went on sale next door to you, or a land. Well, let's not get into the whole house thing, because the machlikas of a house is by Metzra. Let's talk about the land. There's a land, and there's a small, you have a small land, and I know that the land next to you, you're not going to get another land like this, it's good. Lands go very rarely for sale. And therefore, in certain places in France, Lamashal, there are lands that are owned by the same families for 500-600 years, where they grow grapes, and they already have their wines with stickers on them. It says that from the 1600s, they've been squeezing grapes with the same place and the same color wine and the same bottles and everything comes from the same place. So I knew you're not going to be able to get such a land. So me being your shliach, I knew that you will be willing to pay more than what it's worth. And I bought it for you. That's what the Smeh says. Therefore you can't say, no time of the sikunish daticha veloi leivusi. And then the Smeh says, but now we have a different problem. There's a machlekas rishonim if there's a no bekarka or not. And so therefore over here, when you say 100 versus 200, exactly double, you have a shayla of a no bekarka. According to the Taisus, the Rosh and the Tur, there is a no bekarka. And therefore, if it's double, the mekach should be nisbatel medinai no. So therefore we must say that Meya Masayim doesn't mean Meya Masayim, but means Meya versus 199. Or Masayim versus 101, whatever, not exactly double. And only according to the Rif and the Rambam that there is no Oino Bekarkoes, then it could be exactly double or more. The Shah, what? Double and higher. The Shara Mishpat says, interesting, din, that if the lekeach comes and says, I know it's double, I know it's overpriced, I bought it because I have specific reasons that I like this land, even though on the market it will never fetch such a price, then there is no din of the Metzra. Not only the matzrin has to, the matzrin have to pay full price, there is no din de Metzra bichlal. Why is such a extreme thing from the Shara Mishpat? Pesach Tshuva brings it, and the reason for it is like this. Let's say the lekeach knew that it's less than the value. That's what he says. I know it's that I'm paying much more, and the value of the land is less than that, and I'm paying for it because I like it. What would happen if the seller would go to the matzrin would not pay such a price. And therefore, the buyer would say, I'm not willing to pay. The matzrin would say, I'm not willing to pay such a price. So Bamela doesn't know bar metzra anyways, because the matzrin walked away and Lokeach would buy it anyways for this price. So there's no bar metzra. And
So only if it's double or any?
No, higher. It's higher. And if Shar HaMishpat. Shar HaMishpat says it. Not arguing the Rama. He's talking specific. If he comes with a tiny that I bought it mipnei chavivusa.
Why else would he buy it? Instead of what's the case?
Maybe he got fooled. I know. 199 to 100.
He says the whole story is that you know.
Because you could up to doubles. Now I know.
No, but says the reason why you can't say that.
Because could be Mishum Chavivusa. The Shana Mishpat says what happens if he comes and he says for sure Mishum Chavivusa. He gives two svaras. One svara is the matzrin muchach is not going to pay the full price. Second svara is if the Lu Yitzur, he would walk over to the matzrin and offer him this land, and he would not settle with the lekeach, the moicher would end up not being able to sell because the lekeach would come and say, I'm not change his mind and not buy it, and you're causing a loss you're causing a loss to the moicher. And now if you cause a loss to the moicher, again you have no bar metzra. So therefore he says, why do you have to go in circles? L'chatchila says no bar metzra. In such a case, and even though there's no even though we say that it's asur to do eino bekarka, yeah, it's an isur of eino, over here, because he clearly says, it's chaviva line, that's why I'm paying more, there's obviously no eino, and there is no din of the Metzrah, and the Matzrin can't take it out of the Lekeach's hands. The Nachlas Tzvi, which is the beer on the Shulchan Aruch, I think it's in the back of the Shulchan Aruch, says that even here there is din of the Metzrah, even when it says chaviva. Hosta shayle, that is a hefset to the Meicher, could become a hefset to the Meicher, like we said before. The Choshen Veifo, it says, Nishken Kasha, it's not a hefset, it's a Menias Revach. You didn't cause any loss. All you did was that the seller couldn't have sold it overpriced. That's not a hefset. That's a Menias Mammon. Menias Revach. Menias Revach is not the hefset that cancels Bar Metzrah.
You say that later it's man, it says through time.
Yeah, I'm saying this is the Choshen Veifo takes his position. He says that it's not.
Time-wise, he comes back and says, I'm bringing it 5 days.
I'm bringing the one?
Yeah, if the balance said 5 days, I'm bringing one.
Yeah.
That's what I'm bringing right now.
Yeah.
Then it's considered Menias Hefsed.
It's considered Menias.
Right.
It's considered a hefset?
Yeah.
Yeah, later.
Even though it's just the Menias here also.
Yeah, but over there it's for sure it's a Menias. It's not a Menias Revach. It's a hefset. He's not going to have the money in his pocket right now. Over here, what he's saying is, there's no Vadai Revach that's going to happen. You have a Shaila over here, maybe you're going to cause him a hefsed. So he says, this maybe, that you might cause him a hefsed, is not enough to do it.
Not maybe, he's saying he's willing to pay 200. It's not maybe.
Yeah, but Poil, he's not losing anything. He says, because all you're saying is, the Matzah anyways has to pay 200. Right? So the seller is not going to lose any money. Elamai, we're saying the Shalom Mishpat wanted to say that because potentially if he would have offered it to the Matzah and he could have backed out of the deal and it would have been a hefsed to him, then that's enough to cancel Bar Metzrah. The Choshen, if it's too far-fetched, it's not enough to cancel Bar Metzrah. That's in the gather of Menias Revach, not the gather of hefsed. Now, obviously, what's enough nafka mina between the two? Like we said before, what happens if between the two shittas harishonim, go back to the rishonim that we said, Machlekes, Tosfos Rosh, and Tur on one side, and Rambam and Rif on the other, regarding Eino Bekarkois, up to half or even more than half, if there is Eino Bekarkois or not. That what happens if the Matzrin pays more, and not the Matzrin, the Lekeach paid more than double. If we follow the shitta of the Tosfos, the Rosh, and the Tur, the Mekach is Nisbatel, and maybe the Matzrin doesn't have, if it pays more Mekach is Nisbatel, and the whole thing is off the table. If you follow the shit of the Rif, there's no Eino Bekarkois, the Rif and the Rambam, the Mekach is not Nisbatel, the Matzrin has to pay more than double. The Chalas Lechem says, because you have a Machlekes Rishonim and there's no Achro, Sfeika, the Dinne, Ein Mitzin Miyad HaMuchzok, who's the Muchzok? The Lekeach. The Ulam HaMishpat says, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. What relevance does Eino Bekarkois have to this? Not the Matzrin and not the Lekeach want to be Mevatel the Mekach, and not the Moicher. Who cares if there's Eino Bekarkois? The whole thing of Eino Bekarkois is whether you want to be Mevatel the Mekach or you don't want to be Mevatel the Mekach. Whether you want to be Mevatel the Mekach or you don't want to be Mevatel the Mekach. No difference. Who cares if there's no Bekarkois or not? And therefore, say according to the Tosfos and the Rosh and the Tur, say according to the Rambam and the Rif, if the Lekeach paid more and there's no tanya of Knunya, there's no tanya of anything of the sort, obviously the Matzrin wants it, he has to pay even more than double. That's how the Ulam Mishpat looks at it. The Avnei Mishpat also says, I don't understand the whole discussion of Eino. Ask the Lekeach if it was Nisan or not. Maybe he knew the value. And he wasn't Nisan, there was no Eino. Yeah, that's that point. Now let's move weiter. Now if you have we said in the beginning of, we said that there's two places where you make a shvuah, yeah? In the first case, when he says that he paid 100, he says in the second case, no, the first case is when he claims there was a knunya, and there mashbiya that he paid 200 and then he pays him 200. In the second case, when he says there's Eidim and he says, I know that it's not true. The Smeh says in the second one, he says l'cha'ira, even though the word vadai only appears in the second case, when it comes to Eidim, you have to have a tainas vadai in the beginning also, because how could it be mashbiya mesafek? And the Smeh says no, even in the beginning, you could be mashbiya even misafek, because this claim, this tviyah, such a high number tviyah, such a big tviyah, that in such a thing, you could, when he comes and he makes such an extreme number, you could be mashbiya even if he doesn't say, I know for a fact that there was a knunya over here. Elamai, the shvuah has to come before. And he has to do the shvuah first, and then afterwards he pays it. In the Sefer, when there's Eidim, he can't say, I want to make a shvuah first, be mashbiya you and then pay you. He has to pay, and then he could, if he wants, he could be mashbiya him afterwards. And obviously over here, you have to have a tainas body because it's a stronger svara to do a shvuah. So the Smeh separates us. In the second case, you need to have a tainas body. In the first case, even tainas shema is enough to be mashbiya. All this is based on a Magid Mishnah. The Magid Mishnah says, I have a suffix if you mashbiya and tainas suffix or not. The Taz doesn't get complicated between the two cases. He says, you can be mashbiya even in the second one when it's a tainas suffix, because it's a raglayim l'davar, and he proves it from a Ramah later on. The Shach also doesn't get confused in the whole thing, says punkt verkehrt. You can't be mashbiya in the first one, even if there is, unless there is a tainas body, and that's what Shulchan Paskins also. Sheshanas Yaakov goes into a whole long discussion, a full page, small letters, on this, Sifkat and Vav. And he says, have a still in the Shach. Seemingly in the Shach, in Dinei Shtaris, and Siman Samach Vav, I think, there's over there, that the Shach says that you could be mashbiya b'tainas suffix. So why over here the Shach says you can't be mashbiya b'tainas suffix? So he says it's different. They're over there, you're talking about that the only reason he would have been believed is that he has a migu, and then we say even b'tainas suffix you could be mashbiya him. Over here, there's no discussion about ne'emanus with a migu or without a migu. He's neman even without a migu, and therefore over here, you don't have to be mashbiya him on a tainas suffix. And then he comes and he kind of a gewaldige question. You have over here the seller. The seller comes and says, I got paid 200. So he should be Eida Mesayeya to the Lekeach. One aid who's Messiah to the Lekeach. So the Sheshanas Yaakov says, but that only works, but that would not work in this scenario. Why? He's Negeh B'davar. Why is he Negeh B'davar? Doch the Matzin comes and says, Knunya. The Matzin says this whole thing is a scam. They're doing this together. He got 100 under the table. He's giving back 100 under the table. He just wants to kick me out of this field. So the Shans Yaakov says, and that's why, but you need dafka tainas body. When do you want to passel Eida Mesayeya? You want to take somebody and make him passel mitzad this, is only if you have a tainas body of a knunya. Then he becomes an Negeh B'davar. But if you don't have a tainas body, you can't passel him as an Eida Mesayeya, and you only have a tainas suffix. You can't passel somebody misafik. If you can't passel somebody misafik, it becomes Eida Mesayeya. Eida Mesayeya, you don't need shvuah anymore. And the Mishpat Shalom brings him, but I don't know whatever the relationship between the two was, but he doesn't bring him in his name. He says Matzasi b'sefer echad shehik shalzeh, and that's it. Even though the Mishpat Yaakov writes a whole long thing.
I don't know, why is it Negeh?
What?
Why isn't he give though? He's saying he's time to do the money. He's time to pay the money.
No, Adam is saying, talking about the seller coming as aid, not the Adam on the side. Talking about when there's no Adam, the first case, there's no Adam. He's tiny in Knunya. So the Shana Yaakov says the seller could be an Adam Messiah to the buyer that he paid 200. One aid. Eid echad. Messiah. Huh? Who? The Moicher?
The Lekech.
We're talking about the Moicher. Why is the Moicher not a kosher Eid echad? He has no Nagia now. Elamai, if it's a Knunya, then there's a Nagia. If it's not a Knunya, there's no Nagia. That's what the Shana Yaakov explains why you have to have a Tainas body, even in the first one, like the Shach. And even though you could argue that the Rav Magid did have the suffix, that the suffix that Rav Magid was in the first one, that you might understand that you could be mashbiya even betaina suffix, you still machriya the Shana Yaakov like a Shach, that you're not mashbiya in a taina suffix. The Chalas Lechem also paskins like a machriya like the Shach, and he says that the Shach wrote it very clearly. The Smeh who makes a suffix about it, even though he's noted to say that you could be mashbiya with taina suffix, doesn't clearly say you could be mashbiya with taina suffix, and you have the Shach which says clearly you could be mashbiya, you cannot be mashbiya with taina suffix. Therefore, you paskin like the Shach that you cannot be mashbiya with taina suffix. And even if you want to say that there is that the Smeh clearly says that you are mashbiya with taina suffix, so we have a machlokes. And if you have a machlokes, suffix will you paskin like it? Suffix will you paskin like you can't force a shvua on the lekeach who is the muchzik mitzad sveika the dinner. Huh? No. Today we're figure out how to avoid shvuas. Now, what happens if the lekeach didn't pay it, the full price to the moicher, for the high price? So how does it work? The Chalas Lechem says an interesting thing. The moicher takes the lekeach to Bezdin for a specific performance. Fulfill your contract, pay me 200. The lekeach then has to go with a matzah to Adon Torah that the matzah should pay him the full 200. The deal has to be finalized. Otherwise, it doesn't happen like that. The Chavas Yair says, no way, absolutely not. The moicher, the lekeach doesn't have to pay anything to the moicher because he's anyways going to lose the karka a day later. He doesn't have to be in the middle. And all the moicher has to take a shvua that the price that was agreed upon was 200, and then he gets from the matzah the 200. And the Choshen Veifrit says everything is right except for the shvua. He doesn't even need to do a shvua. He could demand the 200 from the matzah, and the matzah has to pay the 200. Huh? There's two opinions. Who's here? The only machlek, there's a chalas lechem that the lekeach is still here stuck in the middle until he finalizes his deal, and then the matzah comes after him. Then you have the Chavas Yair, the Chavas Yair and the Choshen Veifrit, that the lekeach is not part of the lekeach is out of the picture, and the matzah has to pay the 200. The only machlekes is in this specific detail. According to the Chavas Yair, the moicher has to take a shvua and then get the 200, and according to the Choshen Veifrit, the moicher does not have to take a shvua. And what is the logic behind it? If you look at Mishpat, it's a relatively new sefer, he says simply, the Chalas Lechem looks at that the lekeach, that the matzrin is not a baldin like we discussed until the lekeach has a land in his property. So until that moment, the moicher could change his mind and not sell bichlal. So if the matzrin wants the property, the only way it's going to work is if the lekeach buys it from the moicher. And if the lekeach doesn't pay the moicher, the matzah also doesn't have to pay the moicher. Doesn't have to pay anybody. But according to the Chavas Yair, the lekeach, the moment the matzah shows up, the lekeach becomes a shliach. But now that it's clear that there was no money made, take the shliach out of the picture and pay for it yourself. Now, it's not common today to have such dintaytas about these questions about how much, about somebody who claims that it's worth less than what it is. Today, usually the dintaytas are the other way around. that the papers come, because today everything is registered. You buy a house, it's registered online, how much you pay for it. LMI, you have in New York something called a mansion tax. If you buy $1 million house, you pay the tax, extra tax. If you pay $999,999, you don't pay the tax. It's a $1 difference, and you start paying an extra tax. So what happens if somebody has a 1.6 house, buys a $1.6 million house or a $1.8 million house, then there's no, then the papers are going to usually show the numbers. But if somebody's selling a house for 1.1, it's l'toivas shneim that the $100,000 should be in Schwarz, because then the koine doesn't pay. There's no mansion tax, and there is, and you don't pay taxes on it. Other taxes also on it. So what happens if a yid buys from a yid a house, and we say this by Metzrim and Batim, yeah, Lamberzogen, or it's 2 fields, he buys it, and the price on the paper is $999. The Matzrin comes and says, here's a check for $999. The Lekeach says, you and I both are from New York, and you know that this number is not true. I paid $100,000 on the side in cash, came with a suitcase. And that I saw in the Torah also. And that becomes also, who is to prove it? Obviously, the Lekeach has to prove that he paid more. And the Moicher is not going to be a Messiah to the Lekeach to say that he did something wrong. But he has to prove that he paid more. And then he gets the money. The Ramah concludes that if the Lekeach received the land as payment for a debt rather than purchasing it from the Matzrin, from the Moicher, we don't look at the number of the debt, rather we look at the value of the land. Bezdin make a shuma of the karka, and that's how much he has to pay. That's what the Ramah says, brings it from the Rivash, the Shach, the Taz, the Smeh. Everybody disagrees with it, says it makes no sense. What do you mean you're going to calculate that the Lekeach is now going to end up losing? You're going to calculate what the value of the land is. The Lekeach was ready to take this land, he was owed $1 million. And he went, and he took this land because he gave up on dealing with the seller, with the malva, with the loiva, for whatever reason it is. And now you're going to come and say, Bez and Shamin Akarka, 750. So now he's left with nothing. He wanted the land because it was worth more for him. That's why he was willing to waive part of it. You have to make a shuma of the chayv. And the Rivash anyway says, he understands, says according to the Rivash, you have to make a shuma of the chayv, not a shuma of the karka. So now, taka, if the land is worth more than the chayv, so the Aruch HaShulchan understands from the Smeh that the Matzrin only pays the chayv. He doesn't pay the value of the land, that the land is worth more than the chayv. Even though that's going to cause the moicher to lose. Why? Because the moicher gave $1 million land for a $750,000 debt, for whatever reason it was, and now he's left with nothing. The moicher lost already. Yes, that's what we say, moicher lost already. So then there are those which want to understand the Ramah differently, and they say, let's not completely delete the Ramah, that the Ramah misunderstood the Rivash, the Chalas Lechem, the Mishpat. They say the Ramah is talking about that not the whole chayv got eliminated, only part of the chayv got eliminated. And therefore, you need a Shumas Bezdin to know how much of the chayv gets eliminated for this land. And once you know how much of the chayv gets eliminated for this land, that's how much you're going to deduct from the chayv, and that's how much the matzah will have to pay the lekeach. However, if and they both say, however, if this was to waive completely the full chayv, then you pay the full chayv. And if you say that, then the Ramah doesn't disagree with anybody else, because the Ramah is talking about a partial chayv. That's why you have to be sham in the karka, how much it is to calculate versus the chayv. But otherwise, you sham in the whole chayv. So now, Lamaisa, according to the Shach, the Taz and the Shach, the Bezdin has to be a Shuma of the Shtar Choiv. How much will the Shtar Choiv be worth? Not Mama Shaman is a Choiv, how much is owed, but how much a Shtar Choiv is worth when you sell this note on the street. And not the Karka. And that is what the Matzrim pays the Lekeach. According to the Smeh, you look at the chayv, that's the day he understands the rivash, and you look at the chayv itself. Sometimes the value of a shtar chayv depends on how easy the person is. Now let's go to the other question. What happens if the malveh, who is the lekeach, didn't yet collect? He wants to use the land to collect for this chayv, and the matzrin wants to buy this land, and the matzrin says, I'll pay cash to you, the lekeach, for whatever the debt is, and I'll take the land. So according to the shach, how does it work? And the seller is ready to give the whole land for the chayv. So what happens if it's above value or at value? Then it's easy to calculate. What happens is below. If the chayv is less than the land, how much does the matzrin pay? So according to the shach, since the matzrin was already ready to give the land, not the matzrin, since the loive / moicher was ready to give the whole land for the chayv, so he already deleted this land from his mind. So therefore, all you do, the matzrin only pays the chayv. That's it. Not the value of the land. And then the Sivis says no. Why is the chayv worth less? Because everybody in the street knows that this loive is a kvar alam. To get $1 out of him is going to take a long time. So therefore, any debt which he's signed on is only worth 50 cents on the dollar, if you're lucky. But now that there's a land on the table, the shtar chayv might be worth 50 cents on the dollar. The chayv is a full chayv, because the land could cover the whole chayv. So why should the lekeach / malva lose out when there's already a land that he could have covered that's worth more, that he could have covered all the money? So obviously you have to do the cheshbon of what the actual chayv is, and you get the full number, and you can't say, we're going to calculate how much, the shach says you calculate the value of the shtar chayv. It says over here, you can't say you calculate the value of the shtar chayv. Sif Yud, and with that we're going to finish. If the moicher sells al t'nai, whether the t'nai was done by the moicher, whether the t'nai was done by the lekeach, the matzrin cannot receive it until the t'noim are fulfilled, and then the lekeach gets it, and after the lekeach fulfills the t'noim and gets it, then the matzrin gets it. Why is that? Very simple. The Smeh says, because the moicher or the lekeach, whoever one made the deal, could come and say, we don't trust the matzrin is going to actually follow through with the t'naim, to me or to him, whatever the t'naim were, if the t'nai for the moicher, the t'nai for the lekeach. So therefore, let everything work into place, and then the matzrin could come and take it, because they don't trust the matzrin. Then the Sivis has a question. I don't understand this whole thing. By Hamtane, which is a Tanai, which we discussed in two Sifim ago, the whole din of Bar Metzra is cancelled. Why over here, when it comes to other Tanaim, the Bar Metzra is not cancelled, and we just say fulfill the Tanaim and go weiter? Also, what svar is there that the lekeach will have to fulfill certain Tanaim when he's not going to have any benefit from it? It's only going weiter to the matzrin. So the Nesiva says, no, we have to divide. There's 3 kinds of Tanaim over here. If the moicher does a Tanai that is for his own benefit, like I'm going to sell you the land for this price, and you're going to have to go to the government, because you work in the government, and take care of something for me, or you're going to have to do this for me or do that for me, then that Tanai is a Tanai that the moicher obviously only relies on the lekeach to do, not on the matzrin. Otherwise, he would have asked the matzrin to do it. So that's like Hamtana. And over there's no bar matzra bichlal. But if it's a Tanai shein, it's not l'tevasai, it's not for his benefit, like imloi avai, or imloi eilech, or whatever such a thing is, imloi avai zman ploini, stamet Tanai, then the matzrin does have to wait until, then it's not, and like Hamtana, and the matzrin has to wait until all the time are fulfilled, and then it kicks in. Why? Because maybe the mekach will be in his battle, so there's no point in going in circles. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan paskins. The Aruch HaShulchan also adds another point. If it's a Tanai of the lekeach, then the matzah for sure could is koidim and doesn't lose his matzronos. Because it was usher for the lekeach meikara to do such a thing. It was, even though we say there's no real isser in the lekeach until the matzah show's up. Over here the matzah showed up. So the lekeach has no right now to say, I want that I want to cancel bar mitzvah because of tnaim. No, you put yourself into this position, fulfill it, make sure that tnaim are fulfilled for your own benefit, and then transfer it to the matzah. The Erech Shai brings one nekuda. We'll just finish with this. That if the tnai, it gives an example, what kind of tnai is l'toivas hamoicher. The Erech Shai disagrees with the Nesivos, but what tonight the Tevis HaMoicher says what happens is sometimes people say, I'm selling you this land, and I have a certain amount of time that if I'll change my mind, I could buy it back from you. Then obviously the Matzin has to wait until, the Erech Shai says, until that time frame passes, and then he could get the land. But that's only according to Erech Shai, because according to the Nesivos, this would be enough of it tonight to completely cancel the Bar Metzra din. Because the matzronos, because it's t'nai l'toivas hamoicher, and the reason the moicher did the t'nai with the lekeach is because he doesn't trust the lekeach that he's going to fulfill it. Therefore, he made the t'nai with the lekeach, that specifically, and not with the matzrin. And he compares it to amtana. And if the Nesivos compares it all to amtana, that I could buy, the moicher could buy it back within a few months, within a year. But if we compare it all with this, I'm going to conclude: if we compare it all to amtana, then the same dinim, the Sibur doesn't mention, the same dinim of Amtana should be that if the Moicher says that he doesn't care if it's the Matzah or the Keach to do this specific tonight, or the Moicher says, I originally didn't get along with him, now I do get along with him, or I never really had, it was Megal doesn't have a problem, the Bar Metzrish would not be cancelled even according to the Nesivos.